IT Insights, talks on business and IT challenges with tech leaders.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of IT Insights by Future Processing. My guest today is Antony Bream, and we're going to discuss how external advisors and tech consultants are helpful and why should we engage them. Anthony, would you be so kind and introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello. So Antony Bream, Managing Director from Ribbit Consulting. So I founded Ribbit 7 years ago after spending many years selling software into financial services and building global software teams. I found that selling software and selling into organizations was getting harder. And I have a natural passion and inquisitive mind around the process of selling and the psychology of selling. So I kind of looked at the two areas together, and I've combined that to build some intellectual property, some best practice that I work with my clients to help them embed into their organizations to make hopefully selling easier, because certainly buying has got a lot more complicated. So really sort of helping firms look at the easiest way, the quickest way to convert product idea to product revenue.
Thank you, Anthony. Digging to the topic of the conversation, I understand you are a member of plenty of advising boards on strategy, on governance, on recruitment, and go-to-market and sales approaches and strategies. What are the most important questions companies ask themselves today in this ever-challenging environment when it comes to these aspects?
Yeah, good question. I think, first of all, I'd always recommend, advise, expect, hope that my client has a sense of purpose. So what is your purpose, number one? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to solve as a problem or realize as an opportunity? And I talk a lot about this concept of start with the end in mind. So when I talk to my clients and say, so what are you doing and why does it matter and how are you going to achieve the success you think you can achieve? I always refer to this phrase of start with the end in mind. And I've actually borrowed that from Stephen Covey, from his very, very interesting book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. It's always sort of strung a bit of a chord with me, and it makes the client, the founder, sit back and really think hard and deep in terms of what does the end look like. So when you know what your end game looks like, whether it's 3 years from now or 5 years, whether that's selling your organization or building it to the maximum size it can get to, I always advise my clients to think about that and then plan back from that point. So rather than planning forward, I say plan back, work with that end in mind. So working alongside clients that have been through successful acquisitions or mergers, I've learned that it's always important to really plan back from that. So if I want to be acquired, who could be the top 5 acquiring companies that I think of today? And that will change over time, but it always seems to help give people what people refer to as a North Star, or a bit of a moral compass in terms of where they're heading. And it helps you make decisions, I think, easier, because you're always asking yourself, will the decision I'm making now move my company forward to that end point? So what's your purpose? What does the end game look like? And how do you work back from that?
I really like the bit about starting from the end. It's really
Yeah,
focuses on like
yeah,
a complete reshift of approach and a reverse engineering kind of approach.
yeah, exactly. Maybe my background is engineering, so maybe that's why it's come out from contextual for the business that we're operating in, because sometimes, a founder will say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, look, if you want to be acquired, who's going to acquire you? What does that company look like? What would you like it to look like? That company may not exist today. It may not have even been founded itself, but, give yourself a steer of direction, and then, think about that every 6 months, every 3 months, review it with the board, review it with your advisors, your investors, but have a sense of travel. Where do you want to get to? How do you get there is the next question. So, of course, people are a very important aspect of how you achieve that goal. And of course, as you're going through the building of your company, you will need different people at different times. You'll need different skill sets at different times. So be brave in your people selection and hire the people in that you need now for the short-term view, but also always have one eye on the medium to long-term view. So, for example, in the software industry, many of my clients will be at a point where they want to recruit heavily into their sales and marketing functions. They've maybe received funding. They want to go and sell more and spread the word of what they do more. But when do you need to think about customer success coming into the equation? When do you need to think about a chief product officer? When do you need to think about maybe building more people into your risk team? Because as your business grows, you need to be thinking ahead in terms of the resources that you need, not just here and now. So people are always really important to get right, but think about hiring the people that you need now, and plan for the people that you need to succeed them or to complement them or to help them along their way. So purpose and people. Thirdly, process. So, I'm a big believer in process. Again, probably going back to my engineering days of simplifying complex problems and building little sort of building blocks to help you get along your way. So think very much about the process that you apply to all parts of your business. And I've been in many a workshop where I've actually worked with clients to map the process of their business. How do you run your finance team? How do you sell? How do you take an invoice from a client and convert that to revenue in your bank? How do you report to your board? Those processes are very, very important to define because they not only tell you how you should operate your business, but more importantly, they tell you the roles and the responsibilities of the people in that business who should be operating the relevant part of the process. And what I see happen when firms scale and they scale quickly is it can very quickly get confusing. It can very quickly get complicated to run your business because everyone's assuming that somebody else is doing the work because roles and responsibilities haven't been clearly defined. So always define your process, update it, reflect on it, and align your roles and responsibilities to drive, again, going back to the people, what sort of people you need in your business to help run your business. So have a clear view of your process. And following on from that, I guess you've got then proposition. You may have noticed now I've got a bit of a trend to use things that begin with the letter P. So
Yeah, people,
process,
process was the fourth
yeah.
P.
What's your proposition? What value are you bringing to your client base? What problem are you solving? And I love to use this phrase, untrapped value. What untrapped value in your customer's customer are you helping them untrap? Are you helping them find? And in the current climate we're working in, you've got to have a very laser sharp proposition that's resolving a problem here and now, because your customers' budgets will be reallocated. They'll be realigned to fit the way that the climate crisis is creating more pressure on firms to have sustainable investing. The price of energy is making firms rethink how they, improve their cost-income ratios. So, think very clearly about what your proposition is. What's the exact problem it's solving? How is it solving it? Why is it different? And are you able to help your client find untrapped value for their own customer? So a great example of that is BNPL, buy now, pay later. That was a wonderful way of helping people provide a service, an application, a way of actually untrapping value in their customer's customer. I'm a user of BNPL because I think it's a fascinating way of taking your financial responsibility at a personal level under your control more. And I think that could even replace the credit card one day as a concept and as an actual ability to control your spend with people that you're spending money with. So proposition is the fourth one. And then the final and fifth one, I think, is make sure that the technology that you have is fit for purpose, because I see a lot of clients really struggling.
Another purpose then.
Yeah, purposeful technology. Maybe we'll use that as the
Okay,
fifth
all
P.
right. Yeah, fits for the formula.
Yeah. So really make sure the technology you're deploying now will be fit for purpose in 1 year, 3 year, 5 year. Have a plan that says, what happens if I have 10 instances of my software for 10 different clients? Can I scale that? Can I ring fence those instances? How do I deploy across multiple countries? How do I assure data protection? So you've really got to find a very strong CTO who's got all of those angles covered in terms of purposeful technology. So they're my 5 Ps.
So Purpose, people, process, proposition, and purposeful technology. Where in
Yeah.
that equation or where in that formula there's a space for an external advisor?
Well, I think that's a really, really important part, because if you think about traditional organisations, and of course with COVID, we've seen what they call the Great Resignation or quiet quitting. The way that organisations function now has fundamentally changed. The way that organisations support their employees has fundamentally changed, because HR has provided a function of hiring and firing, probably more firing than hiring most recently. HR has always performed the function of, are we following policy? Are we compliant to policy? And CFOs have always been looking at the balance sheet, the numbers, and the CEO has always had the chairman as their conscience, the chairman asking the questions on direction of travel of the company. Are we governed well enough? But I think the way that things are shifting now is everyone has to change the way that they perform their role. HR has to become more of a support function to support employees working hybrid hours, working flexible patterns, working from home more than in the office. The CFO has to become more involved in commercial business decision making topics, not just reporting, their annual report and their financial reports. The CEO needs to surround himself or herself with external advisors to allow them to run their business in a very agile, flexible, and scalable way, so that when they need to reduce the size of their organization to accommodate what we're going through now, they can do that, but not damage their organization. And when they need to scale their organization through a growth phase, they can scale again without damaging their organization. So external advisors really bring in, I guess, a number of perspectives. The external view of what they're seeing elsewhere in the market, which often is very difficult for a CEO or a board to see elsewhere. They're blinkered because of their role. I think CEOs need to ask more questions, both internally and externally, to learn from those questions rather than dictating. They need to listen and learn and understand more. So hearing the voice of an external advisor to say, this is what I'm seeing across my clients, my industry that I'm working in, that's really, really important. But also complementing existing skill sets is critical. So I see the best companies at the moment that are really navigating their way through these troubled waters are the ones that have a very strong core set of technologists, a very strong core set of analysts, a very strong core set of salespeople. But they're now starting to use tools and services around them to help provide those people be more productive. So helping them do more with less. And you can be quite smart about how you do that, whether it's through clever lead engagement tools, or whether it's by using specialists, firms that have access to talent that can be used for projects to complement your existing teams. That to me is where you're bringing in new ideas, new innovation, and also you're bringing in people questioning what you're doing, whether it's the right way of doing it. Have you thought about doing it slightly differently? Have you seen the benefits of this approach? So I always think that you've got to have one ear listening to your internal employees and one ear listening to the external, and that to me is the recipe of success for organisations going forward now and wanting to grow and survive over the next sort of couple of years of turmoil.
It sounds like there's plenty of value that the external advisor can bring to the table. Definitely can contribute in plenty of aspects. But how to sort out the collaboration with the advisor or technology consultant to ensure like the highest value of this partnership?
Yeah, very interesting again, because I recently did a course looking at psychology or executive coaching, and this is part of what I want to do to help improve my level of service that I can give my clients. So I've always felt that I have a strong background and pedigree and experience on the process side of how you operate in organizations, particularly around selling. But I wanted to spend a bit of time learning more about how people think, how and why people make the decisions they make. So I did a course during the COVID lockdown with the University of Cambridge, and we did a lot of work around psychology for executive coaching. And one of the things that came out of this course was what they call the Abilene Paradox. So any business leaders out there who are setting strategy, conveying strategy to your teams, read up about the Abilene Paradox. And what it says in summary is effectively, if you have an organization, and I think the size of the organization is sort of almost irrelevant. I think this applies for any organization of, say, more than 10 people, especially when you've got people that are distributed in different countries, cities, locations, offices, homes. And that is, people tend to get conflict in organizations because what happens is the board set the strategy. They think they've communicated that strategy clearly to the management team. And then the management team think that they've clearly set the strategy within their own teams. But what happens in the Abilene Paradox is that the strategy definition from the board gets diluted, it gets misinterpreted, it gets reworded or rethemed. And so when it gets down to the employee doing the actual work against that strategy, then there gets confusion. And what happens is people tend to huddle in groups, maybe functional groups, maybe project groups, but they'll then start to create conflict because they will assume that what they've interpreted as the strategy is right, but not always the case that it is right. So it's a great way of explaining how if boards and even senior managers now don't articulate clearly their strategy, and again, this goes back to my previous points of process and proposition and roles and responsibilities. If people in the organization that you're running aren't clear of their role, their responsibility, where they fit in the process, how they innovate within that process, then you're going to have the same issues that the Abilene Paradox creates, which is uncertainty, assumption making, and that ultimately leads to conflict because these little groups that form all have different views of what they think the strategy should be. And when you put them all into the same room, then people start to look confused and get angry or get depressed or, get demotivated because they're not quite sure what they're doing is right or wrong because it's not very clearly defined up front. So clearly define your strategy, clearly define what role people play in that strategy, how are they measured, how are they motivated, and how do they innovate to improve and grow into that strategy. And I think a lot of people now in the Great Resignation and quiet quitting are just probably being worn down by not being able to raise their hands in the air to say, look, I've been doing this thing for 20 years. I think we can do it differently, but no one's listening, So I think managers, C-level managers, stakeholders need to be more listening than talking, and then making sure that they are validating how we've clearly defined our strategy to our employees, to our customers, to our board, and validate that continuously, because if you have any misassumption being made, that can be quite dangerous for your business.
That's very interesting, and I really like the bit about the paradox. How does the company, or how should the company choose the right consultant or the right partner to collaborate with?
Well, I think obviously experience counts. So people that have been through a growth curve of building, scaling, and then maybe selling a company, that experience really counts because a bit like a Formula One team, the teams that perform well are the ones that are able to tweak and make small adjustments to get big gains because they've got the experience, they've got the data, they've seen how the car performs on various tracks, on various tyres, in various weather conditions. So obviously experience counts. Chemistry is really important. So, you're working closely with these people, you're maybe questioning some of their decisions, you're possibly calling their baby ugly, which is saying that what they built isn't quite right or how they're promoting it isn't quite right. I've had that experience before where I had one client, it took me 2 years to convince the client that the website that they built 5 years ago was old, outdated, and I had to learn very quickly how best to approach that, because the CEO, effectively my client, my boss, he had built the website. He was very proud of it, but the feedback I was getting from the client base was, we don't really understand what you guys do. So I had to collect a lot of data, a lot of evidence to convince him that he had to make that change through data. So I think a good advisor has to basically be on their toes and understand their client well enough to know, how do I best manage my client? How do I best get them to where I think they should go in a way that is fair, that's validated, and isn't personal. It's not questioning the value of their business. It's just getting your advice over as best as you can. So you've got to really get under the skin of the client and get to know them well very quickly. And I think I'd say a good consultant is one that always asks the client questions, doesn't tell the client what they should do, what they think, what they know. Is getting that balance of questioning and telling, because again, going back to my coaching course, I did a couple of courses where one of the things that you learn very early on is that the good role of a coach, or a role of a good coach, is they ask more questions than they tell. They get the client to come to their own conclusion, because the client has their own ideas and instinct, but it's just maybe a bit foggy or clouded with lots of things all going on at once. So a good coach, a good consultant, a good advisor will be asking lots of questions and helping their client get to the right answer in their own time, in their own terms, not dictating how they should do things. So I think the role of the consultant has changed to be more consultative rather than directive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really like the bit about asking rather than telling. And it's not about maybe avoiding cutting corners, but more about letting them figure out themselves and having
Yeah.
an idea, of their own, so that they can feel more vested in than delivery of that idea or making that true,
Yeah.
instead of being forced,
Yeah.
anything upon them.
Yeah, 100%. Because obviously, you're dealing with clever people. They're brave. They're risk takers. They've formed an idea. They've seen a gap in the market. They've maybe left a well-paid job to go and form this company. They're reliant on investors who are slowly taking control of their company. So we're typically dealing with smart, intelligent people who have 1,000, a million one priorities that they have in their head. So an advisor really has to help them get clarity of what is the most important priority. How do I handle this particular issue? And it's a bit of counselling. There's a bit of consulting. And I think the best advice that you can get when you talk to a counsellor is don't become a counsellor to try and help yourself. You've got to become a counsellor to help people that need counselling. So again, a consultant has to have a level of flexibility in their kit bag to allow them to take points of view on and consider them as well, because they're not always right. So I've always felt that you're working in a partnership. It's not a one-way street. You're not telling the client what they should do. You're getting the client to come up with their own answers in the best way they can, and adding some experience into that mixture to make sure that you're creating a sensible way forward, not one that you are thinking might work, but actually for that particular client it might not work. So it's really getting that partnership working where you're getting the best bits of both of you together rather than one or the other.
Last but not least, the bit about technology. You mentioned about the purpose for technology, and you, of course, having experience in designing strategies that rely on implementing cutting edge technology solutions like AI and you name it. What are companies looking for right now when it comes to technology? What's the usual, I don't know, fit for purpose or the reason behind implementing technology, and what kind of technology that is?
Yeah. So I think the number one now is security. The migration to the cloud has happened. It's happening, but it's happened to a sense in the fact that the majority of people now, can't afford not to be on the cloud. The economy of scale is now so compelling with the cloud that it's very difficult for firms to ignore it or to move away from it. They're moving more towards it. So security of what you've got on the cloud is critical. So you've got to make sure you've got a very secure platform. It's foolproof as much as possible. You've got to also have a platform that's flexible, because what you're building today will very quickly out of date in 12, 18 months' time. So you've got to be able to either have a very good core foundation where you can plug in best of breed components that are the best of breed at the time and unplug them to help you keep up to speed. But also you need to think about a platform that can scale. And also you need to think about a platform that is flexible to allow you to change the way that it works. And I think one of the best examples I can think of right now is I'm working with a client that provides a core banking platform. It's cloud native. And what we're seeing at the moment in the industry is not just banks wanting to launch banking accounts or banking products, but now enterprise companies, whether they're car manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, telecommunication companies, they're all looking to embed fintech or embed finance into their internal supply chains or their external customer services. So all of us will be using those on our apps and our phones, but they're looking for a platform that will allow them to be a pharmaceutical firm that can provide financial services to their retail outlet of pharmaceutical shops or to their clients, or a car manufacturer wanting to provide people who buy their cars with additional financial services to understand their behavior, track the way that client's using that credit card or that financial service, so that you're tracking that client against the brand of the manufacturer. They're looking at your car manufacturing site, not just to buy cars, but to get a loan, to open up a current account, maybe get a mortgage one day, who knows? But it's a way of trapping in your clients to keep them loyal and to keep the data that you're learning about your client's behavior useful to know what sort of products you want to be launching further downstream. So you've got to have a core platform that's flexible, there's open APIs, so you can plug best of breed bits of componentry in, and also one that can very quickly allow you to innovate and launch new products to market. Now, traditionally in the core banking market, core banking platforms are very slow to innovate. They're very rigid in their architecture. They're very expensive to maintain, and they're very, very hard to change. So the new banking platforms that are more modular, more open API, more fit for purpose for the industry that we're working in, allow that flexibility, allow that scalability, but also inherently come with the security, because they will obviously sit on an AWS, a Google Cloud, and Azure, or something similar that's at scale. So it's really focusing on what you're good at and then building that into other infrastructure environments that have already been pre-built, proven to be secure, proven to be scalable, and becoming the best of breed of what you're good at, not trying to reinvent the wheel. Plug in the bits that you want to add into that to allow you to be that underpinning technology platform. So you can then modify yourself and modify your third parties to keep yourself current, up to speed, and secure.
Yeah, I do also see that security is gaining ground when it comes to trends on the IT market. Thank you, Anthony, for this for the leadership piece and for these insightful insights. I really interesting insights. I really like the bit about your 5P, and then how you explained how to choose how to see if there's the right fit between you and the consultant when it comes to experience, chemistry, and this consultative approach. And thank you, our listeners, for being with us during this another episode of IT Insights. If you liked it, don't hesitate to share it, and please do drop us a line if you'd like to have a topic covered in one of the other episodes. That was IT Insights with Antony Bream. Thank you.
Visit us at itinsights.tech and dive into our podcasts, webinars, and events.